This episode is brought to you by some amazing people. Patrick O'Leary, Marcel Gouffonian Metalhead, Nutslap, Tabin Rice. Welcome to the show. Living Life Consciously with Hello Allie, Gemini Moon, Space Baby, Mythoclast, Ray B, Gene G-Force Star, Moody Mongol, Lisa B, Fur 3 Norm, Grey Wolf, and Joanne, Shelley Montgomery, Aaron's Energy 313, Multifaceted Jules, Eric Booth, The Diz Loki, Nathan from the Quantum Show, Gary T, T-Bone, Richard and Fern Harrison, Eddie Tab, Mecca Mickey, Diane Boss, and Jeanette Angel. And a special thank you to all of our subscribers on YouTube, Spotify, and now on Rumble. If you wish to support the podcast, you can hit that join button below to become an Eyes to That Sky member. Or if you want to join the Patreon or to provide other support, the links are below in the show description. But now, on with the show. Welcome to the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast, where we explore the unexplained and mysterious phenomena that have occurred throughout the state of Michigan and beyond.
From UFO sightings to ghostly encounters, we delve deep into the stories, the evidence, and the theories behind these strange events.
We are your hosts. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Wayne.
We are an educator duo that after an encounter with a triangular UFO in 2018 in Michigan, we decided to investigate UFOs and the paranormal. In this podcast, we will be speaking with eyewitnesses, experts, and researchers to uncover the truth about some of the most intriguing cases of paranormal activity in and around Michigan.
Our goal is not to convince anyone of the existence of these phenomena, but rather to provide a platform for discussion and exploration. So, buckle up and join us on this journey down the paranormal rabbit hole.
On an escalator.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome.
Hey everyone, how's everyone doing tonight?
Yeah, we got a feisty chat going already, and it is Sunday, April 13th, 2025, and we're coming to you from our deep inside our bunker tonight. We're tucked away in the shadow of the great Motor City, Detroit, Michigan, on an overcast, misty night as we get ready to hear tales from the other side. So tonight we welcome Simon Bown, author of Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of an Afterlife. He's here to share his research into the near-death experience and is this verifiable proof and evidence of the afterlife. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and prepare to hear some incredible stories of those that have crossed over and returned to tell the tale. Since Simon is over in the UK and it is late for him, like 1 a.m., we're going to limit his interview to about an hour. And to do that, we're going to dispense with our announcements and bring him right on after his bio. So, Michelle, take it away.
So we do want him to be able to sleep.
Absolutely.
So Simon Bown. Simon is the host of 2 influential podcasts, a clinical hypnotherapist and an author specializing in topics related to consciousness, reincarnation, and the afterlife. He has produced over 800 podcast episodes engaging with leading experts and scholars in the fields of near-death experiences, or NDEs, reincarnation, and the continuation of consciousness. His podcasts, the Alien UFO Podcast and Our Paranormal Afterlife, have collectively garnered over 6 million downloads, with Our Paranormal Afterlife reaching #1 on the UK Apple Podcast Spirituality chart. Simon holds a diploma in clinical hypnotherapy and is certified in past life regression therapy. He has conducted hundreds of past life regression sessions, specializing in guiding individuals through these therapeutic processes. His research is informed by personal experiences with paranormal phenomena, including psychic flashes, UFO sightings, and other unexplained occurrences. These experiences have contributed to his academic interest in the nature of consciousness and its potential existence beyond the physical body. Verified near death experiences, proof of an afterlife, is set to change the conversation on death and consciousness forever. Are you ready to take the journey?
I'm ready to take the journey. Are you ready, Michelle? That's the
I
question.
am ready to take the journey. I'm ready to hear stories.
Yes, absolutely. This is going to be great. And I believe this is the first time we've ever had a guest on to talk specifically about this topic. So this is going to be awesome. So everybody, I want to welcome and bring on Simon Bown. Simon, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah, it's a good time of night to talk about this sort of thing, death and survival and spirits and what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I want to jump right in here because I find this extremely odd that about a day or so before we were to have you on as a guest, this news story's been floating around the mainstream media. And it's the story of and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Daniel Brinkley. And that's
Yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah.
yeah, just happens to pop up, and he's a former Marine, and he was a skeptic. I use the word was a skeptic of the afterlife, but he was hit with a bolt of lightning in 1975 and pronounced dead for 28 to 30 minutes and woke up in the hospital morgue. And he had two other near death experiences after that. Once during, I think it was open heart surgery, and one was a brain surgery, which he talked about a crystal city, seeing these beams of light and things like that. So I'm just curious, have you looked into his story, and what do you make of that?
Yeah, I've looked into his story a little bit. I know a little bit about it, but the things that he talks about are typical of what we see in near-death experiences with spiritual beings and that city. I've heard that before.
Yeah, I just found it very odd that just all of a sudden I've not seen any articles or anything about this. And then about 24 hours before you're to come on our show, talk about synchronicity. And here's this story that's out there. So I was like, well, that would be perfect to open up the conversation with synchronicity. So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
It's the thing that shows up. Synchronicities seem to be sometimes like the universe are trying to give you a message, but a lot of the time it's difficult to work out what the message is. But also, it's after effects. People who have near-death experiences afterwards seem to have amazing synchronicities, and it's one of the common after effects that you see with alien abduction. So there's some kind of crossover there between the two things.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I have here that I wanted to get right into is talking about the many people you've interviewed. And I do have a copy of your book. I haven't dug through it as much yet that I want to. I like to come into these interviews kind of non-biased and not pre-programmed in any way to talk about specific things in the book. This gives you the opportunity to just, whatever you want to focus on with your writing in your book is awesome for us. But you've spoke to many people about these near-death experiences. What are some of the most compelling, verifiable elements that suggest that consciousness survives after death?
Well, it's basically when somebody dies, like they're on the operating table and they're hooked up to these devices, so they know their heart stopped, they know their brain is flatlined, and then the medical staff rush around and do all these things to resuscitate them. And afterwards, when the person is resuscitated, they describe what happened, and the people there will say, "But you couldn't know that, you were dead. We know your brain was flatlined." And then there are cases like in my book where people see things that are in another part of the hospital or miles away from the hospital. And so it's hard to argue against, I think, if there's a skeptical argument that says, okay, if so it happens to somebody in the operating theatre, their body is right there. So maybe they did have some form of consciousness. Maybe they heard things and hallucinated and they're full of drugs. But then that doesn't explain if they see what their family's doing in the waiting room in another part of the hospital. So I find these verification events to be like enough for me, proof for me. And I've done hundreds of interviews with people who've had these experiences on my podcast, as well as talking to mediums and children with past life memories and deathbed visions and all sorts of areas where there's indications that consciousness continues after death. So those verifications can be really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, what has anybody given an explanation that you might think that was okay? So they're saying they saw something fall during the operation while they were under, or um, they saw or heard a conversation that was happening miles away, and this was brought up to a doctor or somebody, and they had some kind of like explanation for it. Have you heard anything from somebody like that that you could say, well, maybe, or is it just complete, just to use a UK phrase, complete bullocks that they are coming up with some kind of thing to explain it away?
Yeah, the explanations I tend to come across seem to be from people who don't know the near-death experience and what happens. They may be really talented, qualified professionals, maybe neurosurgeons or neuroscientists and doctors and all sorts of people. And they'd be experts in their field, but that doesn't make them experts in near-death experiences. One example is that in a percentage of near-death experiences, people talk about the tunnel of light, which doesn't show up in every near-death experience. I've heard it's maybe 15 to 20%. And the doctors, scientists say, well, what's going on here is the oxygen in the blood is decreasing. And so you're getting tunnel vision, and your peripheral vision is closing down. So it's darkness all around, and there's just the light right in front of you as you're going unconscious. But there are people who've had near-death experiences who have that experience that happens to their sight, and then after their body has died, they have the tunnel of light experience. And what they describe in the tunnel of light is so different to this tunnel vision that it can't possibly be the same thing. And that the people who are having the tunnel of light experience talk about how they are actually in a tunnel, although they say the word tunnel is not quite right. It's the best they can come up with. And they also talk about how it's a tunnel of light, could be a tunnel of darkness. Some people say it's a small tunnel, just enough room for them. Others say the tunnel is enormous and they see other people going up it. Sometimes they see people coming down it. I had this guy in my book who describes his tunnel like an aircraft fuselage with all the seats removed, and it just goes off into the distance. And inside the aircraft, there's no lights, but outside there's this amazing light coming through the windows. And there was a girl who had a near-death experience when she was 7. She said for her, the tunnel was made out of transparent bricks and the light was coming through those. So it can't possibly be this tunnel vision thing where your oxygen is getting less and less, because that doesn't make you see, bricks. And sometimes people hear music while they're going up it, or other sounds. And also, I think it's quite patronizing for scientists or doctors to say that they know better than this person. This person's had the experience, the doctors haven't. And if you could imagine, if you were in a tunnel, maybe you went on the London tube train or the subways somewhere in the world, and the next day you told a friend about, oh, I saw this thing happen while I was in that tube carriage, they'd say, oh, no, you weren't there. You were lying in bed. You had tunnel vision. And you think, this is madness. How can you say, I wasn't on that train in that tunnel underground?
Exactly. And when you said that about the doctors, not being experts on near death experiences and their explanations, it makes me think of I don't want to say disdained, but my dislike for certain archaeologists who will go into ancient people's lands And when they're telling the archaeologists they didn't build something, it was their previous ancestors, like the Maya or for whatever, and they live by their mythologies, talking about no, it was this, and they turn around and use the same kind of logic and go, no, 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 very patronizing. We understand that's just a myth. That's just baloney. You guys don't know what you're talking about. And I feel that same way when it comes to, trying to figure out like these megalithic structures and things like that, that there's no way ancient peoples could have moved, the Baalbek triathlon or triathlons. Yeah. They're like 200,000 pounds in just ridiculous amounts. So I get where you're coming from with that. Now, what about these light beings? Like I was explaining to you that this news story that I have right here about a man struck by lightning in 1975, dies for 30 minutes, comes back and is talking about not only a tunnel but beings of light. How common is that? And do you really think that maybe near death experiences are more common than we think and just people are not coming forward, kind of like the UFO thing?
Well, for that point, I think there are a lot of people having it and not coming forward, or maybe they talk to their friends a little bit, or they put it on Facebook, but people around them are dismissive and start to treat them weird and might say to them, "You're okay when you're not talking about the weird stuff." So they learn not to talk about it. And people have distressing near-death experiences where they may be in a hell, and there's about 10% of near-death experiences are distressing, but I think there's probably more of those, but people don't want to talk about it. With the light beings, that comes up a lot, and some might say that they're spirit guides, others might say they're spiritual beings. There are people, it depends on their background, and might say they're angels, but they get described sometimes as 10 feet tall or 12 feet tall, and they're glowing beings of light. They're human shape, but you don't see any features. They're just light. And sometimes people say they can see them like down to their knees, and then their legs just kind of disappear. It's like the spiritual beings, that's not them, what you're seeing. They're taking this form, presenting themselves like that, so you can understand that they're a being of some kind, making it easier for the near-death experiencer.
So kind of reaching here into a little bit of the UFO phenomenon, UAP, and aliens. Do you think there might be a connection between these light beings and what we consider these UFO aliens, things along those natures? Have you found any comparisons and correlations?
There are little bits and pieces.
Mm.
I was talking to a guy called Steve Neal the other day, and he's had ET contact his whole life. And he was reading my book, and he was saying he saw things in there that reminded him of his experiences. And it's like there's a few bits in my book where people talk about being in the afterlife and seeing people wearing these white robes with this sash around their waist. And he said that he was on board a craft where there was hybrid children, and the people there, the humans, were wearing these white robes with the sash around the waist. And there's other times where there's suggestions that the ETs were aware of an afterlife and even reincarnation. I've had a couple of people say that while they were in the abduction experience, they said to the ETs, "You can't do this. You've got no right to do this." And they say to them, "But you agreed to this before you were born." And so, that sounds like they're aware of what's going on there. And there's also suggestions, like Steve Neal was saying this, that it seems like they can have a body like the Greys, and when that body gets worn out, they just drop it and move on to another one. And I also talked to someone who said that while they were with the ETs said something like, "What you see of us now, our physical form, is what you imprint on us. Where we come from, we don't actually have a physical form." So that kind
Uh,
of suggests that interdimensional thing or another reality or some form of existence. We're not really sure what it is. So I think there is a crossover there.
Yeah, that makes me think of like some of these cryptid sightings. There's a lot of people that will say that they see a UFO either before or after like a Bigfoot sighting. They will follow tracks of a Bigfoot or a cryptid, so many steps or whatever, and then it just disappears and there's no trace, which makes me wonder if people are imprinting on these interdimensional beings, so if I'm out in the woods and I'm a hunter and I've heard stories of Bigfoot my whole life, and I'm kind of freaked out at night by being alone and I hear some noise, and instead of seeing this interdimensional being, it feeds off of what I'm thinking and projects to me Bigfoot when it has nothing to really do with Bigfoot. Is that kind of like where you're thinking with the imprinting?
Yeah, it's because we get things with ETs, screen memories where people think they see a huge owl or a deer or some other animal, and it's that thing that's almost like they're telepathically controlling what you're seeing to make you feel better and not suspect what's going on. But you're right about that, and that seems to happen not just with the Bigfoot, but all sorts of other places in the paranormal.
Yeah. Well, one question that Michelle and I were talking before the show started, and when her dad was ill, she went and visited him in the nursing home, basically, and she had an interesting
it was his
experience.
rehabilitation center.
Yeah.
And when he was lying in the bed, and this was November of 2023, so a year before he passed, he kept talking about two children that were standing in the corner near the door leading out into the hallway. And what made it even more eerie was my father spoke of the children watching me. He could see them, I could not,
Mm-hmm.
but said that they were watching me in the room.
So yeah, have you heard any experiences from people that have been near people that have died, and they've been told something, then they die, and then they come back? And like Michelle said, it just seems like there's some type of connection there, perhaps.
Yeah, there's a phenomenon called deathbed visions, and that name comes from a book that was published about 100 years ago by a guy called Sir William Barrett, who was part of the Society for Psychical Research in London. And this is people who are in hospice are getting close to death will see people in the room with them, and they may say that their father's come, and the person that's close to death may be 90 years old, or they say their mother's come to collect them, or they're seeing children playing. There's like a lady said to the nurse, "Oh, I can see the children playing out there through the window," and there's no children out there through the window. And some hospices, some nurses get so used to seeing this because it's so common that they take it as a sign that this person is getting closer to death. And I talked to a guy called Dr. Christopher Kerr, who is the director of a hospice, and he did a load of studies, and he had to go through these ethics boards to get clearance to be able to study this. And he went to the patients in his hospice and asked them about their experiences. And he's got it on video, which some of it's on YouTube. And he wrote a book about this study. And you see them talking about all sorts of things happening. And they say things like, "Oh, you've got to make sure I've got my passport because I'm leaving soon. Make sure that I'm packed." And it's like they know that something's coming. Also, they don't find this at all distressing. It's reassuring. You might think if you're in a hospital bed and you look down and there's your dead mother standing at the foot of your bed, that would freak you out. And, some people might get quite scared. But with these deathbed visions, it's just people find it really nice. And there are some doctors or nurses who might hear about this and think, "Oh, they're hallucinating. Let's give them some drugs that sedate them." And that kind of switches off these visions. It's like they're closing something down in the brain there. Because there is a criticism that says, well, they're full of drugs. Of course, they're hallucinating deceased loved ones are around them. But the less drugs they have, the more they see this. And I think it's a good indication that, the veil, they call it, between here and there is getting thinner as you get closer to death, and that sometimes people come and collect you.
Yeah.
Well, I know that my mom, when she was in hospice, she spoke of her mother, and her mother and father being at the foot of her hospice bed, and she would point to the wall area where she saw them. Um, so it was like it wasn't just the picture that she had hanging in the living room of her parents. It's like they were actually there, and that was at maybe the 2 or 3 weeks leading to her passing. So, but I do remember that vividly. Whether she was on the hospice meds at the time or not, she was having those visions.
Yeah, they come up, and the Dr. Kerr was saying the closer you get to death, the more you see it. It kind of accelerates. And it's like they say that, Steve Jobs, when he died, his last words were, "Oh wow, oh wow," and it's like he saw something just as he was dying.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember my mom, she was passing of stage 4 lung cancer, and I remember her, she could never, and this might have been the drugs, but when we were all 6 of us kids were around her bed, she would never get our names right, like who was who, but then she was always talking about somebody else in the room, and we had no idea what she was talking about, a person or her father or mother or something along those lines. So my next question, kind of related to this then, is how do you reconcile this scientific skepticism with this overwhelming anecdotal and experiential, like our experiences we've had surrounding NDEs? Or do you think that we might be maybe on the verge of some type of a paradigm shift here, where maybe some of these doctors will start to take this a little seriously and come forward with some of their experiences?
Yeah, I think it's starting to change a little bit. I feel what it may be is that the older doctors are retiring and moving on, and the younger, open minded doctors are coming up through the system, so that the medical profession might be taking a closer look at it. There are 2 or 3 people I've talked to on the podcast who will go to hospitals and give presentations about their near death experience. And they say a lot of staff show up for it. There is one case in my book where this woman has a near-death experience on this operating table, and after she's stabilized, when she's been resuscitated, she describes what everybody did. And there's a neurosurgeon there, and he clenches his fists and his teeth, and he says, "I'm not going to stand here and listen to this," and he stormed out the room. So there still are those people. And there was Dr. Eben Alexander, who was an atheist, and he was a professor of neurosurgery at Harvard Medical School. And he had this sudden attack of meningitis on his brain, which forced him into a coma, and he came very close to death. He had a near-death experience, and it was afterwards, he was completely changed, and this belief in the afterlife. And also the good thing about it is that as he was such a good neurosurgeon, he could read the medical charts and understand everything that happened to his brain. And he could say for sure there's no way he should have had those experiences. In fact, he should probably be dead, or if not dead, have really bad brain injuries. But he's
Yeah.
back to normal, like nothing has happened.
So, I mean, what do you make of that? Are you convinced that there is an afterlife at this point? I mean, I'm gonna assume that you do, but yeah, I find this fascinating.
Yeah, it's like the title of my book, isn't it? Verified near-death experiences, proof of an afterlife. And I've talked to so many people on my podcasts and had my own experiences. And I started reading books about supernatural when I was 10 years old. And it's just overwhelming when you really get into it. And being a past life regression hypnotherapist, I've taken so many people to their past lives and I see all these commonalities show up, and I've been taken through past life regressions and I know exactly what it's like. And I've had little confirmations there for myself. I had a client who tracked down his past life, somebody who wasn't famous, and he emailed a picture of the oil painting of his portrait from Victorian era and said that was me. As soon as I saw that, I knew that's it. That's who I saw in my regression. And there's so much. And there is a thing, I think sometimes people will kind of make scientists the gatekeepers of what is real. And if a scientist says, well, that's not proven, then it's not proven. But I kind of feel that you can get to a stage where it's enough proof for you, and you don't have to wait for the scientists to tell you it's proven. It's like you might ask Neil deGrasse Tyson, is there life in the universe? And he'll say, we have no evidence of life in the universe.
Correct.
You wouldn't say, theoretically, I say definitely not, but there may be life. We just got no proof of it. And it's that kind of thing. You have an expert in one area, knows nothing about UFOs. So he doesn't,
Exactly.
he can't comment on it really in a way.
Well, our one watcher right now in chat, well, there's more than one watcher, but Straw Dog asked a great question. I'm going to pop it up here on screen. How does Simon feel about children sharing past lives? Because he has some experience with past life. He also went on to say a little bit earlier. Let me find it
As a
here.
child,
Yeah.
he would attempt at sharing, past life experiences and kept getting poo-pooed.
Yeah.
Until he finally just shut down and stopped sharing any of those.
And see, there it is. It sounds like a UFO experiencer,
Yeah.
Yeah, the children with past life memories is remarkable. And Dr. Ian Stevenson at University of Virginia started doing the original studies back in the 60s. And he would have to go to India and the East, because over there, in India, they're Hindu, which believes in reincarnation. So if a child starts talking about that, they don't shush them and tell him it's nonsense or you're just making it up. They take it seriously. But it's becoming more prevalent in the West. More people are talking about it, and they can be very convincing cases. And I've got a book behind me. I'll just grab it. This is by Dr. Ian Stevenson. And what this shows in this book, there are 100 cases where children talk about a past life and they have a birthmark where the injury was that killed the previous person. And there's one guy in here, he was he had all these memories of being a teacher. They got all these photographs in here. And he's got this memory of being a teacher that was murdered on the way to school. Somebody shot him in the head. And Dr. Ian Stevenson tracked down the previous family, and the kid went to the house and he pointed out all these things in the house that had changed since he was alive. And this wife was there, his last wife, confirmed these things. And he said, where's my weapons? Because he had guns in a cupboard. And she said, we got rid of those. And it turns out this guy was a bit of a scoundrel with the ladies and local gangsters, which is how come he got shot. But I got a picture here. I don't know if you can see that.
The title of that book is where
reincarnation and biology intersect.
Okay.
So you can see,
look at that.
That picture there is the previous person who got shot, and the kid has a small birthmark where the entry wound would be and a large birthmark where the exit wound would be.
Wow.
But it's like I say, there's 100 cases in this book, and there's another good one. There's a kid that remembers being a bomber pilot in the Second World War.
I was just going to ask about that because I saw it when I was young. I want to say in my teens, I saw a show here. I think it was 2020, is what it was called on ABC. And they were interviewing this little kid talking about being a bomber pilot in World War II. And he knew all of this stuff. And he couldn't have been more than 7 years old at the time.
Yeah, that's James Lininger. He had a lot of information. Like he talked about his previous life where he would fly these aircraft, and when they come down to land, they were always blowing out the tires. And they found out that the previous personality, before they went into the theatre of battle in the Pacific, they did some work as a test pilot on this aircraft. And part of the testing, the tires would always blow out when they were landing. And there's somebody gave him a model of the aircraft that he said he used to fly, which I think was a Corsair. And he said, oh, they left the aerial off the back. There was an aerial that stuck out the side of the aircraft, and I was always walking into it. And when they did the research, they found out, yes, there was an aerial that stuck out the side of the aircraft, and it wasn't in the model. And it's like, how could this kid know this stuff? But there was another picture in the book. I was see if I could find it, where here he is. This kid remembers being a bomber pilot over Burma, and the British Army were on the ground, and they were fighting the Japanese, and the American bombers would come over and bomb the Japanese, and this guy got shot down. And if you look at his picture,
I'm gonna blow it up here. Okay.
He, you can see the guy next to him is the Ian Stevenson's interpreter, and they've both got the same ethnic background. But you can see how white the kid's skin is.
Yes.
And how he's got blonde hair and blue eyes, and he had all this stuff when he was a small kid, talking about things like, I can't live in these conditions, and he wanted to eat with a knife and fork and not chopsticks, and he wanted to eat sitting down and not cross-legged on the floor, and he didn't want to wear, these what they wear there, these kind of sarongs. He always wanted to wear trousers, and he would talk about the bomber and how he was shot down and all those kind of things. So to see him looking so Western when he shouldn't do, and having those memories, is fascinating.
Yeah. Now, have you found that people, I don't know what else to call this, but maybe like extreme recall of their past lives? Do they have issues mentally, like with mental health, or are they maybe diagnosed with like schizophrenia or these kind of a thing? Because I'm assuming that if you could recall that you're having all these memories of being, let's say, the World War II pilot, and you talk about it, people would think you are going crazy. Maybe we need to rethink this.
Yeah, that's the Western point of view with reincarnation. But it's like, I've talked to a woman, and she's in her 50s, and she remembers her past lives. She's always remembered them. Usually children with past lives, they start to forget them around 7 years old. And she tracked down her past life family in Ireland, and then went to visit that town where her past life was. And she knew her way around the town, and she could walk down the high street and say, oh, the butchers used to be there. There used to be a butcher shop there. And then she went to use this kind of back route around the church to get to where her cottage was, but they'd put a fence up there, so she had to walk the long way around. She'd never been there before, and there was so much detail in it. They tracked down the children from the previous life, so now she's younger than them, but she had so many things to talk about the previous life that the kids accepted her as a reincarnated mother. And if you think that she died around the 1940s, it's not like this woman now could do research on Facebook or somewhere and find out all these little intricate details of this obscure family in Ireland. But she also had a past life in Japan, and Japanese TV paid for her to go there. And they took her to the previous house where she used to live. And she talks about how this big part of the house was gone now. And the family like, how could you possibly know that? We're nobodies. Nobody would know we had that work done on our house decades ago. So what we find with children who have past life memories, if you can track down the previous life and maybe take them to one of the locations, it's kind of a release, and that the confusion goes away and the stress.
Okay.
And it's almost like, oh, I understand now. I'm in a new life. And they just kind of let the old life go. It's like with James Leninger, when the pilot, the parents got really worried about him because when he was small, he would wake up at night thrashing in bed, shouting, airplane on fire, little man can't get out, airplane on fire. And, the kid would be crying his eyes out. So it's very distressing for parents. But they worked it all out in the end. And then he was fine eventually after all the research.
Yeah. Well, before we let you go, we have about maybe 20 minutes left, and I have to switch gears, and we have to cross into the realm that Michelle and I got, intersected with, I guess you could say, that made us begin this podcast and live stream back in 2021. I see back there, you got your frame up of our Paranormal Afterlife, which is awesome, but you started that one first. That podcast was your beginning work, but then you launched the Alien UFO podcast, and I'm curious what made you do both? What spurred on the UFO phenomenon, and your interest in it?
I've just always been interested. It's like when I said I was 10 years old, I'd be reading books. And then when I got into the 80s, I was reading more because there was more out there. The Fire in the Sky of Travis Walton, and then
Yeah.
Betty Andreasen Affair, and then Whitley Strieber's books, and Bud Hopkins, and all sorts of other, like there's a great UFO book called Above Top Secret that came out,
Yep.
I think about 1990, 92, something like that. So I've always been fascinated. And then, like I'm nearly 60, so I would have started reading these books around 1975, 76, but it was in 1993 that I had a UFO sighting. And I did a gig with my band. It was a blues band. We did a Sunday night gig in this town out west of London. And we packed up, and then it was 1 a.m. I'm driving back into London on this motorway. And, we drive on the left. And there were no other cars on the motorway, which seemed weird. And up ahead of me to the left was this really bright light. And I knew it was a field. And I travel this motorway a lot. I knew that was an empty field. There's no buildings there. And I thought, that's weird. 1 o'clock in the morning, a really bright light. I thought maybe there'd been some emergency electricity repairs or something happening. And I slowed down, and there were some trees in the way. And as I got to the point of getting past the trees, that's where I saw this UFO. And it was the size of a large house, shaped like a rugby ball. It was 25 feet off the ground, maybe 200 feet from me. And so I was doing 5 miles an hour, and I was getting a really good look at it. And it had all these red pin spot lights across one half of the bottom of it. And coming out of the other end was a really powerful spotlight pointed at the ground, which now makes me think about you see these depictions of abductions and the spotlight coming out of the UFO like a tractor beam picking someone up. I wonder if I saw an abduction in progress there. But the whole time I saw it, it didn't move an inch. It didn't make any sound. And there's also this theory around that if you see a UFO, it's because they want you to see them, that they're showing themselves to you for some reason. And I wonder if there's this whole thing to do with the universe and consciousness. We're all on a path. You might call it a spiritual path. And every now and then little bits and pieces are given to you to move you another step forward. It's like you see the UFO like that, and it's a kick up the pants. It's to get you to pay more attention to this side of things. And maybe they want to lead you down a pathway to do something. And that may be what happened to you guys with the triangular UFO. It spurred you on to do this kind of thing, just like I got spurred on. I became a communicator by doing these podcasts, communicator of this information, just like you guys have. And it's like another UFO sighting turned up, must be 10 years later. I saw an orange ball of light that was about the size of a car. And again, that didn't move an inch, and that was half a mile from me. And again, I was driving. I couldn't stop on that road, but I got a really good look at it, and it didn't make sense. I couldn't. definitely wasn't a helicopter or aircraft or a hot air balloon. It was something weird for sure.
I think you're onto something. As long as Michelle and I have been doing this, it seems to come back to the fact that if you are the people this, selected, I guess you could say, to see these things, you will have that urge or that compulsion to want to talk about it. And we started this as basically a Facebook group a few days after our sighting, and we just let it sit there. We put our information up there. We did the National UFO Reporting Center, and we did MUFON. We put in the report, and we just left it go. We didn't hear from anybody or anything, but we started having people ask to join our Facebook group. Now, what's interesting is, and this is something that you bring up that makes me think about this, that even though there were vehicles at 2:30 in the morning on the road with us and along the expressway and stuff, there wasn't many, but they didn't seem to react to this thing, almost like they didn't see it. Like it was just Michelle and I that saw it in that area. And, both of us are college educated, right? We're both educators. And I just wonder if these things are somehow evolving with our technology and things, because there are so many people out there now that do things like we do to talk about this. And now we have access to the internet. Before it was, Whitley Strieber writing books, and the day after Roswell, and, books were the medium of the time. Or, Michelle says this all the time, the authors, like Lovecraft and stuff, did they actually see something? Did they know something? Did they stumble upon something, and the way that they dealt with it was writing about it? And so
I've always said that about H.G. Wells.
oh yeah, definitely. H.G. Wells, the War of the Worlds and all of that. And it just makes me, because I've felt this compulsion for the last 5 years, 6 or 7 years now, to get people together to come on to this platform in our audio podcast and record their stories. And the only thing that comes to my mind is just to let you guys know it happened to us. You're not alone, and I think that now that we have these kind of mediums to talk to, and by mediums, I mean, the internet, podcasting, YouTube, all of this stuff. I kind of get the feeling like we're supposed to be doing this and using this vehicle of technology to do this. Your thoughts?
Yeah, because I wonder about my life path and being a musician and learning how to use recording software. And recording a band can be quite extensive, but then recording yourself talking is easy. It's just one voice talking. And I wonder if, in a way, learning the software for a band was an apprenticeship to get me to this point where I can do a podcast and know all the technical side of it without having a problem setting that up. And I wonder also about how things happen over time, like you were talking about H.G. Wells. And there's this theory that, like we were saying earlier, that aliens don't actually have a physical form, and we imprint on them what they look like. And that could go back hundreds of years, but way back then they saw elves, or they saw leprechauns or something.
Yeah, the Fae, right?
Yeah, that could be the same phenomenon we're seeing now, but back then that's how they interpreted it and what they imprinted on it. And the aliens did exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Well, that's perfect for this next question. Have you ever come across any stories that or people you've interviewed that talk about UFO sightings or abductions that felt more interdimensional, whatever that might mean, than extraterrestrial? Since you just kind of hit on that, I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, there's one weird one. There was a guy who found himself in this apartment, and he kept getting a glimpse of somebody else out the corner of his eye, but when he looked around, they weren't there. And this apartment was strangely familiar, and he'd never been there before. And he saw these photographs on the side, and he was in the photographs with people he didn't know. He didn't know any of these people, but they all seemed to be smiling. They all seemed to know each other. And it's almost like he was taken to another Earth in another universe or another dimension where he was living a different life. And then after that, he went on to this space where he was in an airport, and he was standing at those really tall windows that look out over the aircraft and the runway. And he's the only person in the airport, except for him catching this glimpse of someone. And an aeroplane goes along the runway, starts taking off, and explodes. And he finds this to be really shocking. And then instantly he's in that aircraft just before it takes off. And he's in the washroom and he can't get out. It's locked. And he knew he was going to die in this explosion. So it's almost like this was a fake scenario that ET set up for him, almost like to say, okay, how does a human react if it sees this? How does a human react if they're in this situation? And that's the whole thing about interdimensional and other lives on other Earths comes up in other places. There are people who in comas afterwards, they say they lived another life. There's a guy who was in a coma maybe for 7 days, and he said he lived another life for 22 years on another Earth. And he served a year in a Southeast Asian country in a war, and that country isn't on this Earth. And so, the doctors say it was hallucination, some kind of dream, but he says, no, that life was just as real as this one. I had a job, I worked 9 to 5, I'd go home in the evenings, I'd have something to eat, watch TV, I had girlfriends, it's just the same as this life. And he's not the only coma survivor to talk about this kind of thing. So that seems really weird that in a coma, people have near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, really distressing nightmares that seem to be on a loop for some people, but also these other lives in other universes.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. How do you think this might relate to our consciousness? Like our consciousness, there's like the simulation theory and things like that we're living a simulation. If that kind of comes true, or at least has a lot of evidence behind it, do you think that the consciousness in these past lives and everything that's happening would make more sense to do a juxtaposition next to the simulation theory?
I don't know if it's, I think it's almost the thing. Well, for me, if I hear simulation, I think of computers and VR headsets and how it's all electronic, and somebody's a programmer and there's a coding person and somebody else designs the cities or the houses, and then you go into that simulation. But I don't think it would be like that. It would be something far stranger that doesn't involve electronics and computers. And there's this idea with reincarnation that you are living all of your lives in the same moment. Time doesn't exist in the afterlife. So your soul's experiencing all these lives in the same moment. And that there may be loads of you in lots of different universes, and your soul is experiencing all these different yous in all these different universes to experience what it is like to do these particular things. And there's also suggestions that I've had for past life regression that you may have parallel lives. There was one lady who had a life from like 1948, and then it died. And after the person had died in the past life, they met a spirit guide who said, you messed up. You didn't learn the lesson you were supposed to learn in that life. You got to go back. And then they were born in 1958. So that life they went back to live was also happening at the same time as the life that was born in 1948. And then they went through that life and the person died at 90. And you think, hang on, if they're born in 1958 and they die in 90, that's the future for us now. And they are experiencing something in the future and telling us about it. And you do wonder about simulation there. But if it's something to do with consciousness, it's very strange. And there's a saying that it's not as strange as you can imagine, it's stranger than you can imagine. We just couldn't think it up.
Yeah. Yeah, now it's getting really confusing because now you have two lives happening around the, only what, 10, 20 years apart at that point, or 10 years, 48 and 58, right? So
Yeah.
that's really bizarre. But what do you think of that? We live past lives because we as our souls have to learn some type of a lesson. But I also heard, and I think you just mentioned this, but I also heard it put a different way, that the universe is alive. This is kind of what I think. Like, the universe is a living organism, and it is experiencing life through us until we learn something that it wants to know, and then our lives stop. And we join with the consciousness of the universe. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, this depends what you call the universe, consciousness. Some people call it creator or source, or some people call it God. And they
Mhm.
say that we're all a spark of this source of whatever it is, and that we're out living in this cycle of learning for our souls. And having physical incarnation is just a part of that. That's not the whole thing. We come and experience of that and then go back to source. And I think sometimes we focus too much on Earth and think that's reincarnation. But I've had a small number of people go back to past lives on other planets. And so I
Mm.
think, yeah, you're right. If it depends what you define what this thing is, this universe or this creator. But that's what I hear in a lot of places, that we're on that cycle of learning things. And when we've learned enough in our physical lives, then our soul, our spirit goes on to the next stage of learning.
Yeah. Michelle, is there something in chat that somebody wanted to bring up? I thought I saw something from, is it Rick?
Um, well, Rick had said in 1972 he was convinced to drive a vehicle by a friend, in which that night he took my place in the back seat. Later that night they had crashed and his friend had died instead of him.
Ooh.
It's one of those weird things you think about destiny or fate,
Mm-hmm.
about was it meant to happen?
Or
And you
you get
just
a
don't
bad
know, really.
feeling, right? You get a
Yeah,
bad feeling about a friend getting on an airplane, and it's like, I don't trust that airplane. They don't go on it, and that one crashes, or there's an accident of
Well,
some
and
kind.
that's why they created the Final Destination films.
Well, yeah.
So, but Rick had went on to say that he believes to a certain point that each individual creates his or her reality, but the end is constant.
yeah, that's a hard
Oh,
one, isn't it? There's a lot
it
in
is.
there. It's a thing where you say you have a life plan. So before you come live this life, you plan out what it's going to be. So maybe that's creating your reality in a way. But then there's that whole other thing about how your brain has to process what your sensory organs are giving it, and in a way, your brain creates what's going on around you. And that our eyes can only see a certain amount of the spectrum, and our ears can only hear so much. And that gets into that consciousness thing, and you're creating your own reality, and you think, well, what does that really mean? Could it mean that your whole reality you're creating, and everybody and everything else doesn't exist and you're creating it? So yeah, it's like a going into, could do a trilogy there, movies and things.
Well, it's almost like, when you do an experiment, and when you observe the experiment, it changes the experiment. So you can't get the true effect of a controlled experiment just based on your observations. It changes. So,
Yeah, that's the slit experiment in
yeah.
quantum
Mhm.
physics, isn't it?
Yeah, where you observe a particle, or a is it a particle or a wave? Well, it depends on when you're looking at it. Or, if you put what is that? The Schrodinger's cat, right?
Yeah,
put it in a box, and if you don't know what's in there, is it dead? Until you observe it. So yeah, that gets into the whole consciousness fight. But well, we've had you on for almost an hour now at this point, and before you take off, is there anything you wanted to share with us? Anything coming up? Any other shows you got coming up? Interviews? Anything along those lines?
Yeah, I'm going to be on Coast to Coast AM. I think that's tomorrow night, actually. I think it's midnight where they're recording, and it's 8 a.m. in the morning for me. So
well, that'll work
that's
out
not...
better for you than 8 o'clock our time. Yeah.
Yeah. But I've got these two podcasts: our Paranormal Afterlife and Alien UFO podcast. And like we said, it's over 800 episodes. I can't believe it myself.
Yeah.
And I take people through past life regression. And my website is pastliveshypnosis.co.uk. And if you're thinking of doing a past life regression, you can go into my calendar on that site and book a free call. I'll talk to you for 20 minutes about past life regression and what you might want to achieve from it. That's completely free of charge. And then my book is it that side? Yeah, I got the right side.
Mm-hmm.
Verified Near-Death Experiences, which is like we talked about before, there's 30 cases in there of people who see something while they're dead that's later verified, and things they couldn't possibly have seen. And it's difficult to find a way of explaining it that is not their consciousness continuing after their brain has died.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And like I said, this is the first time we've talked this topic on our show. So it's I'm eager to dive into your book once we're done here. And I signed up for both your podcasts so I can start listening through those. And I might be hitting you up with a past life regression here. So once I get some free time. So, but
yeah.
All right. So once again, everybody, you can find him at www.pastliveshypnosis.co.uk. So, and you can email him at si.bownbound@gmail.com. So awesome interview. We love talking to you, and we hope to talk to you again. And by the way, we'll check you out on Coast to Coast tomorrow night. So that'll be awesome.
Yeah, great. It's been really good. You've had some great questions. I've really enjoyed talking to you guys.
Yeah, this has been awesome. So we're very happy to have been able to host you, and we hope to talk to you again soon. So have a great night.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Simon.
Okay. All right. Bye then.
Goodbye. All right, everybody. So like we said, he's over in the UK, and it's now 2:00 in the morning for him, and we wanted to cut that short. So let him get his rest. Sleep is very important, as we all know. So, all right, Michelle, let's do some quick closing announcements.
I was going to say our closing. Remember, if you have a story that you would like to share with us, please make sure that you email us at mi.ufo.podcast@gmail.com.
Yep. And if you guys want to support the podcast, you know how to do this. There's super chats, there's PayPal, there's buy us a coffee, all that stuff. And what T-Bone just did with gifting 5 subscriptions.
Oh, look at him. He snuck that in there on me.
Yes,
Thank you, T-Bone.
Thank you very much, T-Bone. Let's go ahead and flash that up on screen. So thank you. And Kelly Lewis is a member now for 13 months straight. Wow. I think you and Diane Boss are tied for the longest memberships. That's awesome. Thank you very much, Kelly. Your support is much appreciated. Let's see. What else did I want to say about this?
Ash is telling everyone to make sure that you smash that like button and share us out. Make sure that you subscribe. One of the 3 cats is here ready to yell at everyone.
Yeah, he's yelling. Yeah, he's mad about something. One of the things that, too, I did want to bring up is right now we're in a big push to get a certain amount of watch hours on this channel so that we can get fully monetized by YouTube and be able to collect a little bit off those pesky ads that they're always playing for you guys.
Go back and watch some of your favorite episodes.
Yeah, either go back or find some older episodes that you did not watch and watch them, and those hours get added on for us, because it's really weird how they do it. Every day that goes by, they only count the number of hours for 1 year. So if we had a year ago today, let's say we had 200 hours of people watching our stuff, that 200 hours gets lost when they count these hours today. It's really weird how they do it, but it's a moving window that's a year long. So we're trying to get that done and taken care of so we can get some more stuff for the show and all of that. So your help for that is awesome.
And I want to thank the following folks. I'm jotting down some notes during the show.
Yes.
As far as who joined us in chat tonight, we have Straw Dog, T-Bone. We have Blue Crossroads, Diane Boss, Nathan from the Quantum Show, Patrick O'Leary, Mark Eddy, Jay Hall, Bigfoot Michigan Rob, Rick Davis, Woo Riders TG, and Kelly Lewis. I saw you in there.
That's right. And just a quick shout out to the one and only Nathan from the Quantum Show, who donated $3.33 via PayPal.
Got our angel number going, 333.
Let's see, what else did we want to talk about?
Next Sunday.
No, hold on.
Oh,
remember, we've been neglecting to tell people this, and this helps us out as well for financing everything with the show and all that. We have all of these shows that you see here. We started out as an audio podcast. By Monday, I turn all of these videos into an audio podcast. And so you can listen to this show as an audio podcast pretty much everywhere. You can look us up on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, whatever you like to listen to podcasts. Maybe you're at work, you like working out, you're doing long walks, you want to listen to a podcast, download those, and that all helps the podcast as well. So get over there, follow the audio versions of the show, and remember to leave us a review. It helps grow the show. So Michelle, what do we got going on next week?
Next Sunday, we realize it's Easter Sunday.
Yep.
So, but after you've spent time with the family and eating, we'll be spending time with family. 8:00 next Sunday. We are talking to the authors. Wayne's going to have to pronounce the names for you.
Yes. So we have the authors Rocio Aquino and Angel Oregno.
See, now Aquino, I know that was one of my fourth grade elementary teacher. So that name I can pronounce. But
Ringo.
They are going to talk about their book, The Orchid and the Power of Consciousness.
Big brain stuff. Yes,
So,
we're digging into this consciousness stuff. So we're going to be doing that next week. And that's going to be a groundbreaking show for us, because they are a couple great writers. Their book is fantastic. I have it sitting here. And again, I'm not diving into it. I don't want to be biased to it. So yeah,
it was so beautifully put together with a dried orchid and the wax symbol. Wayne handed it to me. He goes, "I don't want to open this. Look, it looks too nice."
It's tissue paper, right? And it's called the Orchid.
So
now, how can you open this? I don't want to open it.
You know what? He was probably the kid with Christmas gifts that would get a small knife or whatever, or scissors, and gently cut Christmas gifts open, weren't you?
No, not.
I was the kid that would open up one end of it very neatly, see what I was getting, and then seal it back up.
Okay, that's fair. But no, I had no mercy on the wrapping paper. However, as you can see in our basement, old toys I've gotten when I was a little kid still have the boxes.
I want to say hello to Shelley Montgomery. I see you.
Shelley, hello. Yep. And I see, let's see, Nathan has shown up. So welcome, Nathan. And thank you for the super chat or the PayPal donation. Who was it? Oh, Kelly Lewis was complaining about coming in late. Kelly, it's okay. Just back up the slider on the video and you can watch it right from the beginning. So,
but everyone, it is going to be quite a week. So
yes,
lots
it
of
is.
state testing
Yep.
in my classes this week.
You know, we could do a whole paranormal show on the paranormal of teaching. Maybe we should do that.
I would love to get paranormal stories from teachers.
Oh yeah. Because
Ooh.
these school buildings are old. They're definitely haunted and have some energies there. So
Hmm.
all right, everybody. Have a great night. We're getting out of here. We appreciate you joining us for this shorter show, but just because it was a short show doesn't mean it was a bad show. It was a good show. I've been watching too much Twin Peaks lately.
Yes, he has.
So,
and the fish is still in the percolator.
the fish is in the percolator.
All right. Have
All
a
right.
great night, everyone.
Have a great night. And remember, keep those eyes to that
That very vast sky.
vast sky. Yeah, because, your consciousness is out there floating.